This is Beyond the Blue Badge, brought to you by the Microsoft Alumni Network, where we dive into Microsoft alumni stories that inform and inspire.
Welcome to the 9th season of Beyond the Blue Badge. I'm Becky Monk, the Chief Marketing Officer of the Microsoft Alumni Network, and I'm so excited to be a host for Beyond the Blue Badge this season and to have an incredible co-host, Larry Hryb.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm thrilled to be here. I worked at Microsoft. I was a contractor from 1993 to 2001, and then full-time from 2001 until 2023, which is when I left the company. I retired. Yeah, I mean, really, coming back to help you host the podcast is really the perfect way for me to get back into this. I mean, Microsoft's 50th anniversary and, of course, the Microsoft Alumni 30th anniversary, two great moments in time. And to be able to come back and share them with you, I'm so honored. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for everybody who doesn't know, and they do, he was Major Nelson.
On the Xbox team, yeah.
So we've got a professional here.
But I also want to point out, you talked about this being a new season. It is indeed a new season. I'm here, Becky's back, but we're also doing something exciting and different. And that is you can see us. If you're listening to us, thank you for downloading the show. If you're watching us, you found us, but we now have a video component, right?
Right. Yeah. And there's a really good reason for that.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that?
Absolutely. So this year, we have launched at the Alumni Network, we've launched a brand new initiative. In honor of the Microsoft Alumni Network's 30th anniversary and Microsoft's 50th anniversary, we are doing Microsoft Alumni Voices, and we're recording the histories, the oral histories of 50 alumni changemakers who are quintessential in the history of Microsoft. And I'm so excited that we've got more than 100 hours of video and amazing stories.
Yeah, so we're not going to play them all right now. We're not going to give you all. We're going to give you a few right at the top. But as Becky said, throughout the year, we're going to be sharing more and more with you, of course, via this podcast, which is now available in video form. We'd love to have your feedback. Make sure you give us some feedback on the show. But this is really exciting. I'm excited to be back in the studio. This is my first time back behind the microphone in about a year and a half. So it's really a moment for me, and I could not think of a better way to return than celebrating the 50th anniversary of Microsoft and the 30th anniversary of the Microsoft Alumni Network.
Right. I think one of the big things that we get to do this year is tell some of the stories that we aren't highlighting on our website. And there's a lot of behind the scenes, in-depth stories of everything from about the innovation of the company, about, the leadership, about the different products that came to be. And in some cases, how everything wasn't necessarily destined, but a lot of serendipity.
Yeah, there was a lot of hard work, a lot of sweat, and a lot of luck. I'm going to go through who we have here. I haven't written down. I want to share them with you because it's exciting. We're going to go right to the beginning, right to the very beginning of Microsoft. We're going to talk to CEO Steve Ballmer. Everyone's familiar with Steve. We're going to talk to employee number 7, Bob O'Rear, who was responsible for getting MS-DOS on the first IBM PCs, PC standing for personal computer. Scott Oki, who founded the company's international division and later became the VP of US Sales and Marketing. Bill Neukom, who was Microsoft's legal counsel, because you got to have lawyers. This was the first time that code could be put on a personal computer to make it spring to life and do really incredible things, like balance your checkbook, which seems so revolutionary back then, right?
Absolutely. I do think that we're going to hear some of these great stories, and one of my favorites comes from Bob O'Rear.
Yeah.
And because he was there, he was a NASA engineer who helped with the moon landings, and he wanted to learn and really get into computer languages, and so he ended up at Microsoft, and he was the guy, like you said, first MS-DOS on the IBM PC. So I'd love us to share a little more about how that came to be.
Yeah, I mean, really, at the end of the day, these are the people that were there at the beginning of history. They helped write the story, and so our job right now is to get out of the way and let them tell it. So let's go ahead and we'll kick it off with Bravo Rear.
Bill's mom was really big in United Way. And the CEO, I can't recall his name right now, of IBM was also big in United Way. They had a chat, and Bill's mom told the CEO of IBM about her son. And that's how that contact originated. It came from the top to contact Bill.
And IBM came to see us about building a personal computer. And I was the account manager for IBM. So from my perspective, it was really turning us into a company and working on the IBM relationship that became kind of my focus. I interviewed and hired everybody, and I was in the thick of everything we were doing with IBM. Bill asked me to help with IBM because I had worn a suit before. And, they were that kind of company, so we put on suits to fly down there and meet them. For the first time, they called and said, "Hey, we're going to come see you. We're going to make you sign an agreement that says you're not going to, anything you tell us, we can use. So don't tell us anything you don't want us to use, because you're going to sign that away. So, and we're going to tell you about something, and you can't tell anybody about what we're going to talk to you about." And we said, okay.
When we flew to Boca Raton to present our proposal to IBM, it was Bill and Steve and myself. We finished our proposal, pulled it off of the printer, ran to the airport. I rode with Bill. I think in his Porsche, and I don't know if we ever got under the speed limit. I know we were way over it at times. And jumped on the plane and flew overnight into Miami. We arrived, and we discovered that Bill didn't have a tie. And we thought, oh gosh, this is IBM. You got to have a tie to go in to see IBM. And our appointment, I think, was probably at 10 o'clock or 10:30 or something like that. And so on our drive from Miami up to Boca, the argument was, do we stop and get a tie for Bill, or do we go in with no tie? And finally, getting the tie won. So we drive into this. We know we need to be at the meeting, and we're going to be late if we get the tie. So we drive up to this shopping center. We go up to the door, and it's not quite open yet. And so we waited for the person to unlock the door of the shopping center. We run in, and we quickly select a tie for Bill, and we help him get it on, and then we go over to our meeting at IBM. Bill and Steve, of course, handled the contract negotiation parts. I was just the technical guy there, explaining how we would pull together the operating system and the languages and put those on the microcomputer.
And, they told us they were going to build a PC. They were going to use the Intel 8080 processor, which was an 8-bit chip. And they wanted the operating system as well as all the programming tools, BASIC, Fortran, et cetera, from us. And we said, well, look, there's a small issue. We don't actually have an operating system. They thought we had, because we built a card that plugged into an Apple II that ran this thing called the CP/M operating system. So they thought we were the developers of CP/M, and we weren't. So Bill says, but I can call the guy whose company, Digital Research, makes CP/M and you can go visit with them. So they rehearse the script because Bill can't say anything. He says, Gary, I'm going to send some folks down to see you. They're very important. This could be huge for the industry. Meet with them. They wound up, he and his wife were in the business. They wouldn't sign the non-disclosure agreement from IBM. We were desperate to still see this go through. And Bill and Paul and me and our agent in Japan, who was also kind of involved in the strategy, a guy named Kazuhiko Nishi, we sat in a room and basically, Nishi kept yelling, F them, let's do the operating system. And we all kind of got ourselves all fueled up. We're going to do the operating system. And Paul said, look, there's a small company here in Seattle called Seattle Computer Products. And they have an operating system that works like CPM, but it also runs on the 8086 microprocessor, which was a 16-bit processor. And Bill had already told IBM, don't put an 8-bit chip. See to the future. Put in a 16-bit processor. And so we told IBM like a week later, hey, we can do this operating system for you. Trust us. And a year later, the first IBM PC shipped. It was a project they had codenamed Chess. Chess was the IBM code name, and we had the one PC. It was back in a closed room in the back of our office. The room got hot back there. There were no windows, but that became the IBM PC.
Probably the biggest challenge in getting this operating system running was fixing problems when you couldn't figure out whether they were software or hardware. And it was quite a challenge because the PC that I had to work with wasn't a finished product. It was a wire-wrapped product where the execution was all in a wire-wrapped situation, and that's meaning it's not a chip. It's just logic on a board that's wire-wrapped, and they insisted on a lot of security. And we'd be in this little room about the size of this room. No, smaller than this room. And these computers, I had 2 or 3 computers in there helping me. And they would generate a lot of heat. And so the wire-wrap PC, the logic wouldn't always execute the same, even though you had the same instruction, because the wires would release and the logic would transition from one thing to another. And so I'd have to cool down the room. I'd have to wait for it to be cool enough to run again, and then execute the program and try to find the error.
Did IBM provide you with a hardware expert to be there with you, or were you doing both?
In those days, I didn't have an IBM expert with me there. No, I had to do both. I had soldering irons. I had some electronics to try to analyze things. And I had a telephone, and I could call and get almost immediate response from IBM if I needed their help. And a few times I had to have them fly up, and they were out of Boca Raton, Florida, fly up and help me solve problems.
Becky, it's great to hear some of the reflections of some of those negotiations and the early working conditions to get the earliest PC working. I mean, because it's something that seems so trivial today was monumental back then. So it was great to hear about that. It was also interesting to hear that they really didn't have any idea how big Microsoft would come when they walked away from that initial partnership, right?
Absolutely. It was a true startup. They were really trying to just get that first big customer. Mm-hmm. And And who knew? It was the beginning of the computer, the personal computer industry.
Mhm.
It was the beginning of everything.
Yeah. So we should probably get going because I know they don't want to hear us. They want to hear from the folks who are there. So who's next?
Of course. So the next what I want us to lean into is Scott Oki. When he was hired, his initial job was to be in charge of 3 relationships, and one of them was IBM.
Mm-hmm.
And he walked into the boardroom and made a suggestion that was going to change that relationship and really set Microsoft up for success. Let's take a listen.
So when I went before the board, I said, we need to change one major thing. And that major thing is we need to give OS2 back to IBM. And here's the rationale. If you give OS2 back to IBM and Microsoft makes its bet on our own software, which at the time the operating system was MS-DOS Windows, okay? So give OS2 back to IBM. All of our software competitors, they're not going to write to MS-DOS Windows, right? They're going to write to IBM's OS2. And why? Well, because IBM is the big pony in the show. All of our software competitors did that. Now, was IBM gonna develop OS2 in a timely fashion? No. Right? They're a hardware company. So they are late. They're probably a year and a half late. All during that time, Microsoft focused writing applications, porting our applications to the MS-DOS Windows platform. So MS-DOS Windows ships with a whole suite, our suite of applications. Did OS2 have anything? No. So overnight, we became the dominant supplier of applications. And they almost instantly overnight became number one. What happened to our competitors? They all went out of business. It took a few years, but they all went out of business. Is there a Lotus anymore? No. Is there a Borland? No. Is there a WordPerfect? No. Is there software publishing? No. Is there an Ashton Tate? No. They all went out of business. So I think it was a pretty good call and a pretty good recommendation.
Now, if you look in hindsight, there's no doubt that everybody was trying to figure out what was going on, and they were making a lot of different bets. So there was a lot in play there and a lot changing. So let's continue on. Who are we talking to next?
Absolutely. Bill Neukom, refresher, he was the chief legal counsel. He was the first lawyer for the company. And he had really good friends inside IBM at the time. So he can give us a little bit of an insight of how things came about for both Microsoft and IBM. Let's take a listen.
At IBM in those days, the smart guys were all sent to hardware, and the rest of us went to software. And I think it was, to some extent a mistake of IBM's to not understand the value of software. They had come from a mainframe dominance situation where it was the old razor and blades situation. You need to buy your mainframe from us, and oh, by the way, you'll need some software for it. Don't worry about it, that's ours. You'll need some servicing, some maintenance. We do that. We'll update you. Don't worry. So it was a one-stop shop. We're an IBM enterprise, and it was different, obviously, with personal computers, where you had an enormous range of people using those for different purposes. And so, but what I think what it came down to was a question of whether IBM would have its own graphic user interface operating system, or whether Windows that we were working on would be the leader, and whether IBM would agree, would they compete with us, or they would ask us to step out of their way, or which operating system would go forward. We had DOS. We were building Windows from DOS, and I think over the course of those visits, I think with almost historic development being done back here on campus, Bill and Steve were able to convince the people at IBM that that Windows was superior and that Microsoft knew more about how to build an operating system and improve an operating system over time than IBM could at the time, or maybe ever could. And so eventually, as I understood it, IBM said, we give up, if you will. We're not going to stand in the way of your doing this. And that, of course, as you just suggested, made possible an entirely new era for Microsoft to go from a language company to being an operating system company. And again, simplistically, I always thought of the operating system as the central nervous system of a computer. If the chip is the brain, you got to have a central nervous system, and that's the operating system. And so through just classic Gates Microsoft, work harder, work smarter, figure it out, come up with a superior product. They eventually persuaded their opposite numbers at IBM that this was not a race IBM was going to win, and they should instead find ways to get out of our way and to do what they could with our operating system.
So Steve tells it a little bit differently. Let's listen to how he talks about what Microsofties called the divorce.
We decided we were going to make Windows and DOS originally would only address 640K bytes of memory. And for the design of the PC, there were reasons why it was hard to break the 640K barrier. But the Intel 32-bit processor, the 386 came along. We'd already had a 286, but the 386 came along. One of our bright engineers, a guy named David Weiss, figured out how to break the 640K barrier with Windows, and that kind of broke the bank with IBM, because now it was clear there was going to be Windows and MS-DOS were already shipping, and we're able to do everything OS2 was supposed to do. I can't remember what year we shipped OS2. I remember the slogan, right for today, ready for tomorrow, OS2. We got divorced from IBM, and I could vividly remember it. I had just gotten married. We moved out to remodel our house. My wife and I were out running along Lake Washington. I stopped to use the bathroom in the Woodmark Hotel. I saw the cover of the Wall Street Journal, and it basically said IBM had divorced us. No, we had to be there's no question. We had to be all in. There was nothing else now except MS-DOS and Windows. We were petrified. We were going up against the bear now. And, it was an all-out war. We had to go beat IBM.
Amazing stories heard directly from the folks that were there, but we are not done yet, right, Becky? We have a lot more.
We do. Every month, we're going to come to you with a bunch more stories. We've got 50 that we'll be telling throughout the year. Plus, we have a way for alumni to share their stories. Because with 290,000 alumni in the world, everybody has a story. Yeah. So you can tell your story at MicrosoftAlumni.com.
Just go over there, share your stories. We'd love to hear it. We heard some stories today about the beginning of Microsoft. We heard about OS2. We heard about Microsoft DOS. In future episodes, we're going to talk about Office. We're going to talk more about Windows. We're going to talk about Xbox. We're going to talk about what it was like working at the company in the early days and up until recently. So we got a lot in store. So thank you for joining us and testing out this new format. On behalf of Becky and everybody at the Microsoft Alumni Network, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you leave a rating and review and share it with someone you know. We hope you join us again for the next episode of Beyond the Blue Badge.